Hi, I'm Alicia Butler-Pierre, host of the Business Infrastructure Podcast, the show where we share practical tips, tools, and tactics to scale your fast-growing small business with less pain. The video that you're about to see is actually a snippet of my interview with Michiko Wolcott. But before we get into that video, make sure you subscribe first so that you can continue to receive resources to calm the chaos of fast growth. Let's get started with the video.
There's a saying, the cobbler's children have no shoes. In this context, it means that we can spend so much time working to make things better for our customers that we neglect our own operations. It's easy to be mesmerized by what technology can do for us, but oftentimes it's at the expense of the very people and processes that also drive results. This is the Business Infrastructure Podcast, the show where we offer strategies, tactics, and resources to cure back office blues and keep your business operating as good on the inside as it looks on the outside. My name is Alicia Butler-Pierre, and I'll be your guide as we journey through this next scale tale. It comes from someone who bravely crossed the invisible line from technologist to humanist and found a way to not just toe that line, but eliminate it altogether. This episode is brought to you by Equilibria Incorporated, the company behind this podcast where we design scale-ready business infrastructure for fast-growing small businesses. Michiko Wolcott is on a mission to do data better. As the managing principal at Insight Analytics and a self-taught process enthusiast, she knows all too well the importance of understanding a process before investing in technology. And soon you'll find out why. This is episode 214, Go to Market, how Michiko Wolcott re-engineered a tech company's process and boosted revenue.
My name is Michiko Wolcott. I am originally from Japan. There's a, long story that gets me to where I am, which is just outside of Tampa, Florida in Clearwater. When I left Japan on a corporate move on account of my parents, I did move to Dothan, Alabama, which is where I learned English.
It's also where she began to hone her skills in another language, the universal language of music.
I studied music pretty much throughout college, went to grad school, multiple music degrees, because that's kind of what musicians do. But I had always had this kind of interest in the kind of a mathy side of things. And I really like statistics. A friend of mine talked me into going to statistics. So that's kind of where I ended up. I got into the corporate world and did lots of quintessential data analysis and statistical modeling and those kind of things, which, are a lot of things that people talk about today.
Years ago, I asked the financial planner about an observation I made. Why was it that so many people with careers that involved math seemed to also be skilled musicians? Music, he told me, is mathematical. So it makes sense that as a musician, Michiko also developed a passion for statistics and data. But as she began to take on more leadership roles, she made a discovery that changed the way she approached data.
I had an opportunity to lead a large group of statisticians, data scientists, what have you. And then from there, I kind of got into more of, there are things outside of actually just doing data and statistics and so forth that actually make data and analytics work. I sort of learned by having those executive responsibilities. But on the other hand, it sort of saw a lot of the human side of things that nobody was really kind of working on. I ended up spending a little time in a management consulting firm. And from there, I sort of decided, hey, I'm just going to go rogue. I'm going to do my thing. And, a lot of that was driven by seeing a lot of opportunities or a lot of kind of gaps that were not being addressed at that time in data and analytics, because everybody does kind of a technical stuff.
The beautiful thing about entrepreneurship is that it takes many forms. While some may start businesses with a proven model, established industry, and identified customers in place, there are others, people like Michiko, the trailblazers, who venture into the unknown, hoping to fill a gap in the marketplace.
And of course, I have the technical background, but I just thought that big gap was really not about people doing analytics, but really sort of how do you get people to use and consume and understand and sort of leverage, right, information so that they, the user, the consumer, the end consumer of information can do things better, not, just so that statisticians can build better models. So that's always been my interest for the last, several years, ever since I got started with my own consulting practice, and basically focusing almost solely on that kind of a human and process, people and process side of data and analytics, and not so much. I'm letting all the other smart people do the really techie side of things, the technology and the methods and those kind of things. I'll let those guys, other people who are a lot smarter than I am, do those things. But I have this keen interest in trying to close that human gap, if you would, of what it means to be successful in data and analytics.
So speaking of data and analytics, Michiko, I know you've described this on the podcast before, what the differences are, but would you mind repeating what data versus analytics is?
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I don't think it really matters a whole lot because they're both information, just different forms, or you do different things to it. One way to look at data is, okay, that's just information in super raw format, just the way it is, and it's dirty, and it's zeros and ones and what have you. So that's kind of one way to look at what data is. And analytics is really something you do to those raw pieces of data to make something, a little bit more consumable, to find out things, to get insights from those raw pieces of data. It's really a process or a series of methodologies that you apply to raw data. And so to make it easier to consume or to get information that's not all that readily apparent. But at the end of the day, what comes out of analytics is also information, just in slightly different formats.
Now that we know the difference between data and analytics, let's get back to how Michiko started her business, Insight Analytics, back in 2015 to explore the human side of data.
Actually, I was really fortunate to, over the years, have a fairly wide network of former colleagues and former other connections, right? The people I've met or people I've worked with, et cetera. And I've been just fortunate to have their trust or have their confidence. And I've also been fortunate to have worked in different parts of the world. Back when I was in the corporate world, I had the opportunity to lead a kind of an international business. And so I had a lot of connections in a lot of places. And I was fortunate enough to sort of keep in touch with those people, not burn bridges for the most part. And it's just one of those things that people would start reaching out to me once they had an issue or problem. And so that's kind of how I got started. I never really had to sell, which, I think I'm really, really lucky that I've never had to sell to get business.
Call it luck, or call it the intersection of when hard work meets opportunity. Whatever the case, as they say in business, your net worth is your net worth.
I'm thankful for the connections and the good working relationships and just network that I've had over the years. And so they would just come out and reach out to me. It's like, hey, this is the kind of stuff that we're having problems with. And I had a couple of really interesting breaks that from a contact from a former colleague of mine, and they would come out and say, hey, this is what we're trying to do. We are in a data business, or we have a part of the business that is kind of like a data business. And can you help us sort of figure out why, how we need to organize ourselves, where our opportunities are and where our gaps are so that we can grow. One of the big parts of this is that not only do they want to just grow, but they also want to be able to sort of grow in a healthy way. So that sort of gets a little bit more into scalability type thinking. How can you not get bogged down? How can you sustain and then grow in a sustainable way and do so without getting super bogged down? Because, it's interesting. A number of clients that I've sort of worked with, particularly in the earlier years, but even now, they tend to be information services type, tech-ish companies. So they either do data for business or they sell either information itself or the services around information. A lot of times they're having problems or challenges scaling or challenges growing.
How does a tech company grow and scale? We often hear about the phenomenal growth of so many of them, but how do they do it? As Michiko discovered, unlike non-tech companies that often leverage automation to scale, that's not the case with her tech clients.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed watching that video. You can catch the full interview at businessinfrastructure.tv or by clicking the link in the description box below. That way you'll know exactly when the next video drops. I'll see you next time.
Join us next week for another episode of Business Infrastructure with Alicia Butler-Pierre.